Ambassador Elena Vance stood alone in her small room aboard the starship called the UES Defiance, and she read the message on her screen for the third time that morning. The words glowed in pale blue light, and each sentence carried the weight of arrogance that only ancient beings could produce. Humanity is hereby summoned to present itself before the Council of 12, the message said. Your species will be evaluated for potential membership in the Galactic Concord. Elena let out a slow breath and turned off the screen. 47 years, that was how long humanity had waited for this moment. 47 years of sending requests and receiving silence in return. 47 years of being ignored like a child knocking on the door of adults who refused to answer. And now, finally, they had decided to open that door, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. The way someone might finally look at an insect that kept buzzing against their window. She walked to the small porthole and looked out at the stars. Earth was far behind them, now a tiny blue dot, lost in the blackness of space. Her home, her people, everything she loved, all of it rested on what would happen in the next few days. The government had chosen her for this mission, and she understood why. Gray streaks ran through her dark hair, and lines marked her face from years of hard decisions. She had been a combat pilot in her youth, flying dangerous missions in ships held together by hope and welding tape. Later, she became a diplomat, the kind who walked into impossible situations and walked out with agreements that nobody thought possible. When the fringe syndicates had threatened to tear apart 3 human colonies, it was Elena who had talked them down. When the miners of Titan had declared independence, it was Elena who had found a path to peace. She did not break under pressure. That was what people said about her, and it was true. Her advisors had spent weeks preparing her for what she would face. The Council of 12 ruled over the Galactic Concord, a vast alliance of 8,000 spacefaring species that stretched across the galaxy. These 12 species were the oldest, the most powerful, the ones who had been traveling between stars when humanity was still living in caves. The Valith were perhaps the strangest of them all. They were beings made of living crystal, their bodies catching light and breaking it into rainbows. They had existed for millions of years, and they believed that biological life, soft, warm, mortal life, was inherently inferior to their perfect mineral forms. The Kreth Dominion was different, but equally dangerous. They were reptiles, massive and powerful, with scales like armor, and teeth designed for tearing flesh. Their society was built on war and conquest, and they respected only strength. To them, a species that could not fight was a species that did not deserve to exist. Then there was the Orani Collective, and Elena found them the most unsettling of all. They were a hive mind, billions of individuals sharing one consciousness, thinking as one, acting as one. They looked at humans with their individual minds and separate thoughts, and they saw a disease, a broken way of existing. These were just 3 of the 12, but all of them shared one belief: humanity was nothing. In the official galactic records, humans were listed as pre-enlightened, which was a polite way of saying primitive. Their file noted that they were extinction-prone, pointing to the wars and environmental disasters that had nearly destroyed Earth multiple times. The final assessment was simple and cruel, unsuitable for integration. Elena had read every word of that file, and she had not argued with any of it. The facts were true, after all. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves many times over. They had fought wars over land, over ideas, over the color of each other's skin. They had poisoned their own planet, and almost made themselves extinct before they even reached the stars. All of this was true, and the Council would use all of it against her. Captain Okonkwo's voice came through the speaker in her room. Ambassador, we are approaching the Council station. We will arrive in 6 hours. Thank you, Captain, Elena replied. She sat down on her bed and opened another file on her tablet. This one contained her speech, the words she had prepared for the council. She read through it once, then deleted the entire thing. Prepared speeches would not work here. The council did not want to hear arguments or pleas or carefully crafted diplomacy. They had already made up their minds about humanity, and nothing she could say would change that. No, she would need something else entirely. She thought about her grandmother, a woman who had grown up during the worst years on Earth, when the climate was failing and nations were falling apart. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about survival, about how their family had kept going when everything around them was dying. "The strong will try to crush you," her grandmother had said. "They will mock you and dismiss you and tell you that you are nothing. Let them see. While they are busy laughing, you find another way." Elena smiled at the memory. Find another way. That was what humans had always done. When they could not match the claws of predators, they made spears. When they could not outrun their enemies, they built traps. When their planet tried to kill them with ice and fire and flood, they adapted and survived and kept going. The council saw humanity's short lives as a weakness, but Elena knew the truth. Short lives meant urgency. Short lives meant that humans could not afford to wait, could not afford to be patient, could not afford to let opportunities pass them by. A species that lived for 1,000 years could take a century to make a decision. Humans had to act now, today, this moment, and that desperation had made them fast in ways the galaxy had never seen. She stood up and looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. A tired woman looked back at her, prime, carrying the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. But her eyes were steady, and her hands did not shake. "All right," she said quietly to herself. "Let them mock us. Let them laugh. And when they are done laughing, we will show them what humanity really is." The UES Defiance continued its journey through the darkness between stars, carrying one small human toward a meeting that would change everything. Elena Vance did not know exactly what she would do when she stood before the council. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not beg, she would not break, and she would not let them win. The game was about to begin, and humanity was ready to play. The council chamber was built to make visitors feel small, and it did its job perfectly. Elena stepped through the massive doors and found herself standing at the edge of a vast space carved from the inside of a hollow asteroid. The ceiling stretched so high above her that it disappeared into shadow, and the walls curved away on all sides like the inside of a giant egg. In the center of this enormous room, a single platform floated in empty air, held up by technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. This was where she was supposed to stand, alone, exposed, with nothing around her but emptiness. Above and around the platform, rising up in great curved tiers, sat the Council of 12. Their seats were enormous, built to make each species look like giants looking down at an insect. And filling every other space in the chamber, thousands upon thousands of observers had gathered to watch. Come to see this moment, to witness humanity being put in its place. Elena walked forward, her boots making soft sounds against the metal floor. A bridge of light appeared before her, leading to the central platform, and she stepped onto it without hesitation. She could feel the eyes of 10,000 beings watching her every move. Some of them had never seen a human before, and she heard whispers and clicks and strange sounds as they commented on her appearance. She was smaller than most of them, softer, clearly fragile compared to the armored and crystalline forms that surrounded her. When she reached the platform, she stood still and waited. She did not fidget or look around nervously. She simply stood with her hands at her sides and her eyes forward. High Arbiter Zelthros of the Valith spoke first. His body was made of living crystal, pale blue and white, and light passed through him like sunlight through ice. When he moved, he made soft chiming sounds, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "How quaint," he said, and the word dripped with contempt. "The humans send a single female to represent their entire species." Perhaps they misunderstood the gravity of these proceedings. Laughter filled the chamber, or what passed for laughter among creatures that did not have human mouths. Some clicked their mandibles, others vibrated their bodies, and still others made harsh barking sounds. The message was clear. Elena was a joke, and everyone was in on it, except her. She said nothing. Warlord Thasok of the Kreth Dominion leaned forward in his massive seat. He was huge, even by Kreth standards, with scales the color of dried blood and scars running across his face like a map of violence. His eyes were yellow with slit pupils, and when he smiled, he showed rows of teeth designed for ripping flesh from bone. "I have studied your species," he growled, his voice like rocks grinding together. "You are slow compared to most beings in this galaxy. You are weak, with no natural armor or weapons. Your bodies break easily, and your lifespans are pathetic, a mere century if you are lucky." He paused and looked around at the other council members, making sure they appreciated his words. "You cannot even breathe in half of the atmospheres present in this chamber right now. If we removed your little helmet," he gestured at the small breathing device attached to Elena's collar, "you would die choking within minutes. Tell me, human, why should we permit such a fragile species among us?" Elena remained silent, her face showing nothing. The Orani Collective spoke next, and their voice was the strangest of all. It was not one voice but thousands, speaking in perfect unison, creating an eerie chorus that seemed to come from inside Elena's own head. "Your kind cannot even agree among yourselves," they said. "You fight wars over resources that could be shared. You kill each other over ideas that differ only slightly. You have even fought over the color of your own skins, as if such a thing mattered." The chorus paused, and when it continued, there was something like pity in its tone. But it was the pity of someone looking at a dying animal. "You are chaos given flesh, Ambassador. The galaxy does not need more chaos. The galaxy needs order, unity, purpose. Your species has none of these things." One by one, the other council members added their voices to the mockery. A being made of living gas spoke about how humans were barely above animals in their development. A creature with too many eyes and too many limbs described humanity's technology as amusing toys. An entity that existed partially in another dimension called humans temporally insignificant, meaning their entire existence was too short to matter in the grand story of the universe. Each insult was worse than the last, and Elena stood through all of them without moving, without reacting, without showing any sign that the words affected her. Inside she felt the anger building, hot and fierce, but she kept it locked away where no one could see it. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "While they are busy laughing, you find another way." Finally, after what felt like hours, the mockery began to slow. High Arbiter Zelthros raised one crystalline limb, and the chamber fell silent. "You have heard the Council's assessment of your species," he said, his voice ringing through the vast space. "Before we hold our vote on your petition for membership, tradition allows you to speak. Though I cannot imagine what words might salvage your species' dignity at this point." More laughter, more clicking and humming and vibrating. 10,000 observers waited to hear the pathetic human beg for acceptance. Elena looked up at the council, really looked at them for the first time. She saw their contempt, their certainty, their absolute belief that they were superior and she was nothing. She saw beings who had lived so long and grown so powerful that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. And then slowly she smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a defeated smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that everyone else in the room did not. The laughter in the chamber began to fade as beings noticed her expression. There was something wrong here, something they had not expected. The human was supposed to be afraid, was supposed to be broken by now. Instead, she was smiling, like a predator who had just spotted its prey. "Thank you, High Arbiter," Elena said, and her voice carried clear and strong across the chamber. "I do have a few things to say." She clasped her hands behind her back and stood a little straighter. The game had changed, and nobody in the council chamber knew it yet. Nobody except the small, fragile, short-lived human standing alone on a platform in the center of the room. Elena Vance was about to speak, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Elena let the silence stretch for a long moment before she began to speak. "You are right," she said, and her words echoed through the vast chamber. Confusion rippled through the gathered observers, like wind through tall grass. This was not what they had expected. The human was supposed to defend herself, to argue, to beg, not to agree with their insults. "About all of it," Elena continued, her voice calm and steady. "Everything you said about humanity is true." She began to pace slowly across the small platform, her boots making soft sounds against the metal surface. "We are fragile. A Kreth hatchling, barely out of its egg, could tear me apart with its bare claws. One of the Valith could shatter every bone in my body just by falling on me." She gestured at her own body, small and soft compared to the massive beings surrounding her. "Most of you will still be here, still sitting in these same seats, long after I have turned to dust and been forgotten. My entire existence is less than a blink of an eye compared to your vast lifespans." She paused and looked up at the Orani Collective, that eerie mass of unified consciousness. "And yes, we are divided. Even now, back on Earth, there are humans who argued against my coming here. There are humans who think we should have nothing to do with your galactic concord. We fight among ourselves constantly, and we always have." High Arbiter Zelthros's crystalline form pulsed with satisfaction, and his voice rang out triumphantly. "Then you concede that humanity is unfit for—" "I concede nothing," Elena cut him off, and her voice changed in that moment. It was no longer calm. It was steel, hard and cold and sharp enough to cut. The High Arbiter fell silent, too shocked by the interruption to respond. In all his thousands of years, no one had ever dared to cut off his words. "I told you that everything you said is true," Elena continued. "But I am telling you about what we were, what we have been, and you have made a mistake that every empire in history has made." She stopped pacing and stood perfectly still, her eyes moving across the council seats like a general surveying a battlefield. "You confused fragility with weakness." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "You live for thousands of years, some of you for millions. Time means nothing to you. A century is just a moment, a delay, a brief pause before you continue with your plans." Elena began to pace again, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But we live for decades, not millennia. Time is precious to us. Every single day matters. Every single hour counts. So while you move slowly, thinking and planning and waiting, we run." She held up her hand, showing her 5 fingers to the council. 200 years ago, my ancestors were sailing across the oceans of Earth in ships made of wood. They navigated by looking at the stars, and half of them died before reaching their destinations. She lowered her hand. "Today, I am standing in a chamber carved from an asteroid, speaking to beings from across the galaxy, having traveled here on a ship that moves faster than light itself. In 200 years, we went from wooden boats to starships. How long did it take your species to make that same journey? 6,000 years? 8,000? You had time, so you took your time. We did not have time, so we invented ways to make things happen faster." The chamber had gone completely quiet now. Even the whispers had stopped. "You think our divisions make us weak?" Elena asked. "They make us strong. When one path fails, 1,000 other paths are being tried at the same time. When one idea dies, 100 new ideas are already being born." She turned to face Warlord Thasok directly. "You say you have studied humans. Then tell me, Warlord, do you know what happened at the Kreth border 8 years ago?" Thasok's yellow eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. "3 of your warships entered human space," Elena continued. "They were on a scouting mission, looking for weaknesses, testing our defenses. Those ships never reported back to you. Do you know why?" Still, the warlord remained silent, but Elena could see his muscles tensing beneath his scales. "Because a human mining crew, civilians, Warlord, not soldiers, found them first. They had no weapons, no military training, no warships of their own. They had mining equipment, welding tools, and cargo loaders." Elena smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "They took your destroyer apart piece by piece. They used industrial cutting lasers to slice through your hull. They rammed your engines with cargo containers. And when your warriors finally died, they died screaming, killed by people who had never held a weapon in their lives." A murmur ran through the chamber, and Thasok's claws dug into the arms of his seat. "You think we are weak because we do not have natural weapons?" Elena held up her hands again, showing her soft skin and blunt fingernails. "These hands have no claws, no venom, no natural armor, but these hands built cities and weapons and starships. These hands tamed fire and split atoms and reached out to touch other worlds." She lowered her hands and looked around at all of them. "Evolution did not give us strength, so we built machines that could lift mountains. Evolution did not give us armor, so we created shields that could stop plasma fire. Evolution did not give us telepathy, so we invented radios and networks that let us speak across the galaxy in an instant." Her voice rose now, filling the chamber. "You evolved past your predators millions of years ago. You have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight for survival every single day. But we were prey yesterday. We remember." She pointed at herself, at her small, fragile body. "We are the species that hunted mammoths with sharpened sticks. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats, knowing that half of us would die. We are the species that split the atom and walked on our moon within the same century. We are the species that looked at a hostile universe and said, 'We will not bow, we will not break, we will survive.'" Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it still carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "You look at our short, fragile lives and see limitation. We look at them and see urgency. We do not have time to wait. We do not have time to be patient. So we push, we fight, we adapt, we overcome." She stood tall now, taller than she had any right to look, a small human woman facing down the rulers of a galaxy. That is what humanity is, and that is why you should be very, very careful about what you do next. The silence that followed Elena's words was the deepest silence she had ever heard. 10,000 beings in the chamber, and not one of them made a sound. Even the council members, ancient and powerful as they were, seemed frozen in place. But High Arbiter Zelthros had lived for too long and held too much power to stay silent for long. His crystalline form pulsed with cold blue light as he leaned forward in his massive seat. "Pretty words, Ambassador," he said, and his voice dripped with contempt, even as something else flickered beneath it, something that might have been uncertainty. "But words do not earn a seat at this council. You remain a single, insignificant species from a backwater system at the edge of the galaxy." He spread his crystalline arms wide, gesturing at the vast chamber around them. "You have no leverage here. You have no fleet that could challenge even the least of us. Your entire military could be swept aside in a matter of days, by any one of the 12. The other council members began to nod and click and hum their agreement, regaining their confidence. "What exactly do you think you can offer?" Zelthros continued. "What do you have that we could possibly want or need?" Some of the observers in the galleries began to jeer again, their fear forgotten, their mockery returning. Elena clasped her hands behind her back and let out a slow breath. "I had hoped it would not come to this," she said quietly. "I had hoped that reason might work. I had hoped that you might see the value in welcoming us as partners, rather than dismissing us as pests." Warlord Thasok let out a harsh barking laugh that echoed through the chamber. "You hoped," he mocked. "This is why your species is doomed, human. You operate on hope, on wishes, on dreams. Hope does not win wars. Hope does not build empires. Hope does not matter." "No," Elena said, and her voice was very calm now, very quiet. "We do not operate on hope. We operate on contingencies." She raised her right hand slowly, deliberately, and extended a single finger toward the ceiling. Not her middle finger, though part of her wanted to make that gesture instead. Her index finger, pointing straight up. A signal. High Arbiter Zelthros tilted his crystalline head to one side, confusion evident in the way his light shifted. "What is this foolishness?" he demanded. "What are you?" "That was a signal," Elena interrupted him again, lowering her hand back to her side. "A signal to my ship, the UES Defiance, which is currently holding position just outside this station." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Right now, Captain Okonkwo is transmitting a data packet to every major news network, every independent broadcasting station, and every planetary government in the galaxy. Every species that has access to the communication networks is receiving this transmission." The murmurs in the gallery shifted from mockery to something else: concern, curiosity, the first stirrings of fear. "The packet contains complete technical specifications for human faster-than-light drives," Elena continued. "It contains our medical technologies, including treatments for diseases that have plagued dozens of species for thousands of years. It contains our agricultural systems, our manufacturing processes, our energy generation methods." She turned slowly, making sure every being in the chamber could see her face. "All of it. Free. Unrestricted. Available to anyone who wants it." Zelthros's crystalline form flickered with what could only be alarm, and his voice rose higher than Elena had ever heard it. "You would not dare." "I already have," Elena said simply. "The transmission was sent the moment I raised my finger. It is complete. The data is out there now, spreading across the galaxy faster than you could ever hope to stop it." Chaos erupted in the galleries. Thousands of representatives from minor species were suddenly talking all at once, their translators struggling to keep up. These were species that had been locked out of advanced technology for generations, kept in their place by the Council's strict rules about what could and could not be shared. And now, everything had changed. Elena raised her voice to be heard over the commotion. "You were right about one thing, High Arbiter. We cannot force our way onto this council. We do not have the military power. We do not have the ancient alliances. We do not have the leverage that comes from thousands of years of accumulated wealth and influence." She smiled that predator's smile again. "But humanity learned something a long time ago, back when we were still fighting each other with swords and arrows. You do not need to be the strongest to win. You just need to be useful." She turned to address the galleries directly, speaking to the thousands of observers who were now hanging on her every word. "Our faster-than-light drives are 40% more efficient than the standard galactic models. Our medical nanites can cure diseases that your species have lived with for millennia. Our food synthesis systems can end famine on a dozen worlds that this council has ignored for centuries." Her voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "And now, Everyone has access to these things. Not just the 12, not just the powerful. Not just the species that were lucky enough to be born with natural advantages. Everyone. The gallery exploded with noise, cheering from some, angry shouting from others, a wave of sound that crashed against the walls of the chamber. Elena turned back to face the council, and she saw something she had never expected to see on the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Fear. "So here is what is going to happen," she said, and her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You can continue to exclude us. You can vote against our membership. That is your right, and I will not try to stop you." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you will do it, while your own populations, the species you claim to represent, the beings who trust you to act in their interests, watch you deny them access to a better life. You will do it, while billions of beings across the galaxy ask themselves why their leaders rejected the species that offered them medicine and food and technology, all for free." She spread her hands. "All because your pride could not stomach sharing a table with the primitives." The council members looked at each other, and for the first time, Elena saw uncertainty in their ancient eyes. They had expected to crush humanity today. They had expected to put the upstart species in its place and return to their comfortable routine. Instead, the ground had shifted beneath their feet, and they did not know how to stand anymore. Elena Vance stood alone on her platform, a single human woman facing the rulers of a galaxy. The vote was supposed to take 1 hour. It took 3 days. Elena waited aboard the UES Defiance during those 3 days, watching the chaos unfold across the galaxy through news feeds and diplomatic channels. The data package she had released spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours of the transmission, independent scientists on 100 worlds were confirming that the human technologies were real. The promises were true. Within a day, protests had erupted on planets across the Concord. Beings who had been told for generations that they could not have certain technologies, that they were not advanced enough or trustworthy enough, suddenly discovered that a species they had never heard of was giving those same technologies away for free. They wanted answers, and they wanted them now. Within 2 days, the pressure had become unbearable. 3 minor members of the council, species that had always voted with the majority to avoid making enemies, publicly announced that they would vote in favor of humanity's membership. The news networks could not stop talking about it. Commentators and analysts debated endlessly about what it all meant, about whether humanity was a gift or a threat, about whether the council would bend or break. Elena watched it all from her small room on the Defiance, eating when she remembered to eat, sleeping when she could no longer stay awake. Captain Okonkwo checked on her regularly, bringing her food and updates and quiet words of support. "You did something incredible," he told her on the second day. "Whatever happens now, you changed everything." "We changed everything," Elena corrected him. "None of this would have worked without the crew, without the scientists who developed the technology, without everyone back home who believed in this plan." She looked out the porthole at the distant shape of the council station. "Now we just have to see if it was enough." On the morning of the 3rd day, she received the summons to return to the council chamber for the final vote. The room felt different when she walked in this time. The mockery was gone, replaced by a tension so thick she could almost taste it. The observers in the galleries watched her with a mixture of awe, fear, and something that might have been hope. Central platform, and waited. The Orani collective spoke first, and their chorus of voices sounded different now. Less unified, more uncertain. "The collective has received input from many sources over the past days," they said. "Our component beings have expressed strong opinions on this matter. The collective has listened. The collective has considered. The collective has reached a decision." There was a pause that seemed to last forever. "The collective votes yes for humanity's membership in the Galactic Concord. A ripple of noise ran through the galleries, quickly hushed as others prepared to speak. The Kreth Dominion was next, and Elena watched Warlord Thasok carefully as he rose to address the chamber. His yellow eyes found hers, and something passed between them. Not friendship exactly, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement. "The Dominion respects strength," he growled. "We have always believed that only the strong deserve to survive, and we still believe this." He bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. But strength comes in many forms. The humans have shown cunning, strategy, and the willingness to take risks that others would not dare to take. These are qualities the Dominion can respect. He sat back in his seat. The Dominion votes yes. One by one, the other council members cast their votes. Some voted yes quickly, eager to align themselves with what was clearly the winning side. Others voted yes slowly, reluctantly, their words dripping with bitterness. A few voted no, species too proud or too afraid to accept what was happening. But they were not enough. When the final count was taken, the result was clear. By a vote of 9-3, High Arbiter Zelthros announced, and his crystalline voice was brittle, with barely contained fury. Humanity is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Concord. The galleries erupted with cheering, not from everyone, but from enough beings that the sound filled the chamber like a wave. Elena bowed her head respectfully, hiding the smile that was trying to break across her face. The people of Earth thank the Council for its wisdom. She turned to leave, but Warlord Tasok's voice stopped her. "Human, Ambassador." She turned back to face him. The Kreth Warlord's eyes studied her with something that looked almost like respect. "One question, if you will permit it." Elena nodded. "The technology you released," Thasok said slowly, "it was valuable beyond measure. Your species spent generations developing it. You gave it away for free, without asking for anything in return." He leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber. "Your leaders approved this plan?" Elena allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "Warlord, you assumed that our goal was to join your little club. It was not." She gestured at the galleries, at the thousands of observers from minor species, who were still cheering and celebrating. "Our goal was to change it. The old order kept power concentrated among the 12. The strong stayed strong, and the weak stayed weak, and nothing ever changed. Now there is a new balance. Now species that were ignored have access to technologies that will transform their worlds. Now the power is spread more evenly across the galaxy. And now humanity has a lot of friends among the beings who benefited from our gift." She turned toward the exit, then paused and looked back one final time. "Oh, and Warlord, one more thing." Thasok raised a scaled eyebrow. "The technology we released, that was our civilian technology. The things we give to universities and hospitals and farmers." Her smile sharpened into something with edges. "Our military technology stays right where it is. So, I would recommend that the Council's newfound respect for humanity continues." She walked out of the chamber without looking back, leaving 10,000 beings in stunned silence behind her. 50 years later, historians would mark that day as the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The old empires did not fall to conquest or war. They fell to irrelevance, as humanity's philosophy of sharing and cooperation spread across the stars. New alliances formed, new technologies emerged, and the rigid hierarchy that had controlled the galaxy for millions of years slowly crumbled away. And in the archives, the story would be recorded simply. The Council mocked humanity. Ambassador Elena Vance raised a single finger. And everything changed. Elena did not live to see the full impact of what she had done. Humans still had their short lifespans after all. But she died knowing that she had given her species, and the galaxy, a gift that would last forever. On her memorial stone, her family carved the words she had spoken to her granddaughter the night before she passed away. "They called us weak, They called us primitive. They said we did not belong. But we did not ask for their permission, and we did not need their approval. We just found another way. The stars kept shining, the galaxy kept turning, and humanity kept reaching for the future. Short-lived, fragile, divided, and absolutely unstoppable.